What is up, everybody? College football on to another weekend and a great weekend it should be. Hopefully, everyone made some money last week. It was actually a good early slate for me, a bad late slate, which has been kind of the opposite lately. So, reverso world. But hopefully, you guys did well. Hopefully, you were able to bank some cash because we got a heck of a slate here for the DraftKings early slash main slate and just a great day of college football all around ahead of us. So before we get started, please hit that thumbs up. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Follow on the socials. You know how it goes. We will be interacting, obviously, myself and everybody else here at Red Zone up until lock for both college and the NFL. So if you have any questions, fire them in the comments or fire them my way. Right off the bat, we have a nice SEC battle. We have South Carolina going to Alabama, who is just what I got to imagine pretty upset after last week. So they are a 21-point home favorite here over the Gamecocks. On the South Carolina side of things, I'm struggling a little bit to get to any of these guys. The only one I have a little bit of interest in is Raheem Sanders, really just because of his workload, to be honest with you. He's seen about 80% of the snaps in the backfield, so he's really the main guy. But the passing game sellers has not looked amazing, and the receiving core is kind of a complete mess. And like we kind of pointed out here, Alabama's going to be dialed in for this one, especially defensively. I do not particularly love South Carolina in this spot. So from a DFS perspective, I'm going to be probably not playing too much South Carolina. Like I said, maybe a little bit of Raheem Sanders, but that's it. On the other side of the ball, this should be a pretty interesting matchup, right? South Carolina does have a good defense. That's what they've hung their hat on, especially the passing defense and the pass rush. So we'll see what Alabama can kind of draw up here. But being at home, 3-touchdown favorite, they've got one of the highest implied team totals on the slate here. I think you got to look to Jalen Milroe to snap back into form here and have an amazing game. So Milroe for me is going to be someone I'm interested in playing. The running game, iffy, Justice Hayes maybe a little bit, but probably not. They split quite a bit here in the backfield. But for me, it's going to be Milroe and then Ryan Williams and Jeremy Bernard. You get a good price on Bernard this week at 4,800, coming in at lower ownership. Ryan Williams is as well because he's priced up. So I like this stack quite a bit. You got to think Alabama, even though it's a tougher matchup, comes out here and just blasts these guys. You would think. So we'll see if they can kind of turn last week into some motivation and kind of keep their season going in the right direction towards that playoff. But Milroe, Williams, Bernard for me, and kind of moving on from this game. Next up, we have Clemson as a 21-point road favorite going to Wake Forest. Clemson, I'm going to continue to play Cade Klubnik played. He's just been absolutely dominant. Ever since that Georgia game, snap back into form, playing at a higher pace. He's absolutely rocking and rolling and dealing. 9K is a lot, but man, I just am going to keep playing him. My only regret from the last couple of weeks is I didn't play more of them, to be honest with you. It's a little bit challenging from stack purposes because Antonio Williams, Brenning Stool, Randall, Cole Taylor, Wesco, all those guys mix in. So I think you can tend to take shots on most of these guys. Brenning Stool and Williams play the most and get the most snaps out there. Get the most targets in this offense. So those are probably the guys I'm going to gravitate to the most. Williams coming in at 5K is great. Brenning Stool, 4K is great. Klubnik is obviously up at 9K, but the overall stack is fairly cheap. So I like the spot for Clemson. And like I said, they've just been absolutely rocking and rolling here. If you want to go to the running game to get a little bit different here, Phil Maffa is in a really good spot, 6,500. They just haven't had to lean on him because Klubnik's been so good. Clemson just pulls out to like 2-3 touchdown leads like very quickly. And they end up resting guys in the second half. So I think Maffa is an interesting pivot. However, he's probably going to get pretty decent ownership here. So I'm going to continue to play the passing attack here. Implied team total around 40. Clemson for me is going to be one of my favorite stacks for sure this week. On the other side of the ball, Wake Forest, you got Hammer and Hank there at 5'9". I don't know. I don't really love it too much, to be totally honest with you. Yeah, he's cheap. Yeah, he's going to save you some dough. But again, Clemson's just looked like a well-oiled machine here. And I think if anything, you can kind of get them on the run a little bit. Damon Claiborne, I played him a lot last week, paid off. I think he's an okay play here, but I'm probably not going to be playing the passing attack. I guess I could see it. You think they're going to be trailing, good game script, but I don't know, man. I think Claiborne and Taylor Morin are the best plays in this game. 4,800 for Morin. He's out there quite a bit. I think you could also look possibly to Donovan Green or Horatio Fields as well if you really need to go down there and get cheap. All three of those guys see the field a lot, but man, it's just going to be a tough one. I think Clemson absolutely just kind of takes care of business here. So no interest in Hammer and Hank, but Claiborne, Morin, Green, and Fields, if you do need to go down there and save some money, it's not the worst plays on the slate. Up next, we have North Carolina hosting Georgia Tech. Tech's a 6-point road favorite here. I think Haynes King, Jamal Haynes, and both Rutherford and Singleton are all really good plays on this slate. King is cheap, 8,100 for a guy that will use his legs, as well as throw the ball. I like it. North Carolina's defense is nothing to write home about, especially their pass defense. We saw, was it JMU a couple weeks ago, put like 80 points on the board almost. So Haynes King for me, I'm not saying he's going to do that, but I think you could do a lot worse on this slate for 8,100. Jamal Haynes as well had a really good game last week. He's the bell cow for these guys. He doesn't see a ton of rushes. He's not going to get you 15, 20 touches in the backfield, but he's explosive. He will be using the passing game a little bit. At 6K, I think he's in a pretty good spot here as well. So those guys are all in play. And then Rutherford and Singleton, by far the clear options in this offense, both 5'3" and 5'5" in the price tag. So Georgia Tech is a pretty well-priced team from a stacking perspective. In a good game environment, over a 30-point team total. I like the spot here for Tech for sure. North Carolina, there's not a whole lot here. I'm not going to be playing Jacoby Criswell. I just don't think he's very good. Amari Hampton, very good, but I just don't love this spot necessarily for him. I think Georgia Tech kind of takes care of business pretty good here. And Hampton's obviously 8,900, and there's, it's very tough to get up there. There is value on the slate, but I don't know if I just want to be paying 8,900 for him this week specifically. So, but he's definitely in play. He's one of the best players on the slate, one of the best running backs for sure. Not going to be super chalky. So I think if you want to get different with your lineups a little bit, Hampton might be a way you can do that. Jones at 5K, Nesbitt at 3,500 is probably their two best targets. If you want to go in that direction, you can. But like I said, I don't think Criswell's very good, so I'm probably not going to be looking that direction. Moving on to the next game, we got Washington going to Iowa. Hawkeyes are a 2.5-point home favorite. There's not much to be said about Iowa, so we'll just start with them. It's Caleb Johnson and nobody else, really. That's Iowa. I don't know really what else to say here. Caleb Johnson's going to get not a ton. He's going to get ownership for sure. He sees the majority of work. If someone's scoring touchdowns for Iowa, if they actually do, it's Caleb Johnson pretty much with a bullet. 8,300 is not a bad price tag for him. Washington's got a pretty good rush defense, pretty good defense overall. We saw him shut down Michigan last week. So Caleb Johnson, good play. Not an amazing play just because it's Iowa, but I think you could go there for sure. On the other side of the ball, Will Rogers, probably not the best play on the slate, but he's been good in his price tags down to 6,300. Again, I think he's going to have a fairly decent game, but we're looking for ceilings, right, to take down tournaments. And hardly anybody ever has ceiling games against Iowa, especially at Iowa when they're home. So I don't really love the spot for Rogers. Jonah Coleman, 6,300, kind of the same thing. I think he could be used quite a bit, but Iowa just plays such good fundamental defense. I think Coleman can have a decent game, but again, are we getting the ceiling out of these guys? I would lean no. But if you want to get ultra contrarian, all these guys are going to be definitely sub 10% ownership. Boston, Jackson, and Hunter at the receiver position are your three main guys. If you want to get weird and get different here, Washington's the way to go because I think they're a really good team. Tough environment, low ownership. So again, if you think that a few of these guys can get there, maybe not full stack it, but pick off some pieces, I don't hate that at all. But not really where I'm going to be looking for stacks. Next up, Wisconsin goes to Rutgers. Wisconsin is a 2.5-point dog here. We got Braden Locke, 5,200 at quarterback. Man, for whatever reason, like all the quarterbacks seem really cheap on this slate, which is interesting. We got Locke at 5,200. Tawee Walker, 5,300. I'm surprised they didn't price him up after last week. He had a really good game. I think he scored twice, paid off that price tag in a big way. I'm going to go right back to the well on him. They leaned on him last week. He got obviously more snaps, more rushes. I think he's in a pretty good spot here. Rutgers defense is solid, but I think they can be had on the ground. So I don't mind this at all. I'm probably not going to be looking to the passing game because Braden Locke has trouble throwing the football. So yeah, it's Tawee Walker for me at running back, 5,300. Definitely a good play on the slate. On the Rutgers side of the ball, I'm not going to be going to the Greek rifle. Again, I think Wisconsin's just good enough on defense that they can kind of hold them in check. And like, what is this guy's ceiling? Not really for me, but Monagai, always in play, 7,600. So he's priced up a little bit, but man, the guy's just been an absolute monster this season. I don't know, I think they're just going to wear Wisconsin down here. He's the guy that you want on offense. I think you could look to Miller or Strong at the receiver position just because of their price tag down here at 4,300, 3,500. But Kyle Monagai is going to be the guy that I'm going to be looking to on offense should we go in that direction. So 7,600 Monagai, that's my dude. Next up, Red River rivalry or shootout, as they used to say. Quinn Ewers was named the starter today. He's back in the huddle here. 9,900 is expensive as heck. But we talked about there is value here on the slate. If you want to look to the Texas passing game, my challenge here is Oklahoma 1 does have a good defense. That's what they're going to hang their hat on. I got to imagine they're going to try to hold the football. They're going to try to grind this thing out and keep it close because if Texas gets the ball and, additional possessions and they have their way, I don't think Oklahoma can keep up with them. But I think, their defense is good and their pass rush is good. And I think they're going to give Texas some issues here early on. So for me, again, very similar to what I was talking about earlier. I like Texas. Obviously, they're probably the best, if not top 2 or 3 best teams in the country. But this is just a tough spot against Oklahoma. Rivalry game. We know things can get weird in this one, especially. And I just don't know about ceiling here for Texas. So the good news is a lot of people think the same way. So you're going to get them at low ownership. This is kind of similar, but more so, in my opinion, to the Washington game. You're going to get a really good team at very low ownership in a tough matchup. So if you think Texas just kind of comes out and steamrolls Oklahoma here, maybe they get a few turnovers and they get extra possessions and Texas can pop a few extra scores in there. Like, you might seriously be in business if you can go there. So I don't mind taking shots on Texas. They're just not my favorite stack because of the matchups here. So again, Ewers, I think Jaden Blue is definitely in play at 7,500. And then you got Bond, Wingo, and Golden down here, 5,900. Golden's 4,400 and Wingo 3,500. They spread the ball out, which makes it tricky to play. But again, I think it's, there's an opportunity here to take shots if you want it. On the other side, man, Oklahoma's down like every receiver that they have on scholarship, it seems like. So the passing game is going to be really hard for me to get to. Javante Barnes, 4,500, and Taylor Tatum at 4K are interesting plays to me just because, again, the price tag here. If you think Oklahoma can just kind of ground and pound this one and control the clock, it's not the worst play in the world, in my opinion. I know Texas, again, has an amazing defense, but you got to think something's going to give here. And I think the running game is more so where I would probably look. Next up, we have 2 teams that like to give up a lot of points in Cincinnati and UCF. UCF is a 3.5-point home favorite here. I have a lot of pieces in this game I like. I like Sorsby at quarterback, 7,400. Kiner, 5,700 is definitely in play. And then you've got the dude Xavier Henderson at 7,100. All three of those guys are very live in this matchup, in my opinion. They're not going to get a ton of ownership in a great game environment. So I like this one a lot. UCF, I have interest in kind of all pieces again. KJ Jefferson's priced up at 8,900. You've got RJ Harvey at 92, expensive again, but in a great game environment if they'll just give him the ball. And then you've got Kobe Hudson down there at 65. So I like both sides of this game. I like both the passing and the running game in this one. I'm going to be mixing and matching this game all over the place, and I'm sure a lot of people will as well. Next up, Cal, after that heartbreaker at home to Miami, spoiling game day and like their biggest day possibly in like 20 years as a program. Fernando Mendoza is a pretty good quarterback here, guys. 6,400. I think he's live in this one. Pittsburgh does give up a lot of points. I think Mendoza at that price tag is definitely playable here. Jaden Ott at 7,700, I think is playable as well. But obviously he's getting up there in price, and you got to start evaluating like him versus a few of these other high price guys. So for me, it's probably more the passing game that I would look to, or I would try to stack Mendoza with Ott. And then you've got Hunter and Deichis down there, 5,300. Actually, all the receivers, Deichis, Grizel, they do mix and match. They do spread it out, but these guys are cheap, 3,100, 3,400. Mikey Matthews at 3,300. I think you could throw darts at all these guys and kind of see if one does pop. I don't hate that at all. On the Pittsburgh side, I mean, there's not much more that needs to be said. This is going to be a tough matchup for Pittsburgh, I do believe. Cal does have a good defense, and they are very well coached. We saw Miami struggle with them for about 3 quarters last week. But man, Eli Holstein's been awesome, priced up 9,700. You've got, he's been fantastic all season long. Desmond Reed at 9,400, same thing. Both of these guys, doesn't seem like the matchup at all even makes a difference. They just smash every single week. Mumpfield, Raphael Williams, and I think even Kenny Johnson are playable here. So I have 31 or 30-point team total here for Pittsburgh. I like this one a little bit. I think this one could sneakily shoot out a little, and I have interest on both sides. Next up, we go Louisville to Virginia. Louisville's a 7-point favorite. Let's see. Tyler Shuck at 7,700. I've been playing him, man. He just doesn't quite go ceiling games here on us, and it's been frustrating because I think the opportunities have been there. But I do like him because of his weapons, and they're cheap. You've got Isaac Brown in the backfield at 4,300, which is just an absolute steal, in my opinion. One of my favorite plays on the slate. Then at receiver, Ja'Cory Brooks and Colin Lacey down here. 6,700 for Brooks, 3,900 for Lacey. Both of those guys will make some of my lineups, no doubt about it. Virginia does not scare me at all defensively. I do have some interest in Louisville here. On the other side of the ball, I do have a little interest in the passing game as well. Calandria at 7,900. He should come in at lower ownership. I'm not going to be playing the running backs here. I don't think Pace is in a really good spot here. Louisville does have a pretty good rush defense, so it's going to be Malachi Fields at 7,500. And keep an eye on Trell Harris. I don't think he was practicing last they reported this week, which would bump someone like Tyler Neville up, in my opinion, at 3,500 becomes a pretty good play on this slate with Fields. So both sides of this game, I think, are playable, especially the passing game. And then obviously Louisville, Isaac Brown in the running game there. Next, we have Stanford going to Notre Dame. Don't really love a lot here from Stanford, to be totally honest with you. If you want to take some shots on Micah Ford, 4,100, he's really cheap. He gets about 65% of the work in the backfield. Kind of a dart throw there. You're kind of hoping he breaks one, because I don't think in volume alone he's going to get you there, especially if they are trailing. So Notre Dame's defense is obviously solid, but I think Micah Ford is the only one I would probably look to playing. Ayamanor, really good player, but just a bad spot here. The defensive backs for Notre Dame are really good, and their Stanford's passing game is just nothing special. Notre Dame, on the other hand, I do have interest in Riley Leonard, 8K. Look, we know he's not the best quarterback in the world, but that's not necessarily what we're playing. We're looking for points, and he can put them up. So I think Riley Leonard at home here is in a pretty good spot. I think Jeremiah Love is in a pretty good spot at running back. And I would probably just stack those two together and move on. I don't know if I'm going to be stacking them with a receiver. Very similar to how Notre Dame always is. They've got a lot of guys that mix in, and everybody seems to kind of get their slice of the pie. And that's not really what we're looking for in fantasy or DFS. So for me, Riley Leonard and Jeremiah Love are my two favorites in this game. Micah Ford is kind of like a secondary price saver. Penn State goes to USC. I think Penn State here is in a pretty good spot, 5-point road favorite. Drew Aller, it's priced down a little bit finally, which is good. Makes him a little bit interesting and playable here, I think. But Nick Singleton hopefully should be good to go in this one. 7K, probably my favorite play on this slate. I think I heard somewhere earlier this week that USC allows more 40-yard touchdowns than anybody else in the country, or they're like bottom 10 or something like that. And what do you know? You have the country, one of their most explosive backs here in this one in Singleton. I could very easily see him busting a few in this game. So 7K for Nick Singleton. I think Allers, like I said, fine at 7,800 if you want to go there. And then I think if you're going to stack them, it's Tyler Warren or Harrison Wallace that you probably look to. Warren being the tight end, but definitely the most used in this offense from a receiving standpoint. And Wallace, we saw earlier this year, have a really big blow-up game. So I think he's also playable. On the USC side, I don't really know quite what USC is planning to do here. The one thing we know about Penn State is they're going to bring their defense. And my big concern is I think they're just going to beat USC up in the front seven. So I usually love Woody Marks, but I just don't know in this one if this is going to be a spot for him. You've got other guys at that price tag that I think have better environments in this one, but USC, I think they're starting to crumble a little bit, and they're starting to face some of this like tougher Big Ten line play, both offensively and defensively. And I think they're in trouble here. So I think USC gets kind of taken to the woodshed. I could be totally wrong on this one. If you think it's wrong, Miller Moss might be interesting. You're stacking him up with Jacoby Lane or Kyron Hudson, Zachariah Branch. Don't really mind those plays at all. They're not super cheap, but they're not super expensive either. So maybe USC takes some shots on if you think this one goes and kind of stays competitive here. But I like Penn State in this one. Like I said, I think USC just gets pushed around and bullied around in the trenches like they did against Minnesota. Next up, we have Arizona going to BYU. Last game on the slate. Man, I don't really know what happened to Noah Fafita. 6,500. Man, this is a spot I want to bet on for Fafita. I think Arizona, I'm still a big believer in this team, mainly because McMillan at receiver, Conley at running back. They just got such good pieces and weapons. But, man, they're a 5-point dog here going to BYU. BYU is not an easy place to play. BYU is a good team, solid team. But I'll probably take some Arizona shots here. Just being totally honest with you, I think Fafita, Conley, McMillan is a very interesting 1-2-3 punch, but problem is they're expensive. So with that being said, I don't think they're going to be that highly owned, which makes them interesting to me. On the other side of the ball, I think BYU is interesting as well. Retzlaff at 7,400 has been pretty solid this year. The running game here is interesting, but the problem is they use 4 guys, and you just don't really know what you're going to get. So for me, it's going to be the passing attack with Retzlaff, Lassiter, Chase Roberts. I think those are the guys you want. Roberts especially is the guy who plays 75, 80% of the snaps. Lassiter gets probably the most targets, I would say. So both of those guys being as cheap as they are, I think BYU is a really fun, interesting, cheap stack if you want to pair them up with some of the more expensive plays on the slate. So that's kind of my breakdown. Good luck this week, guys. Like I said, hit that thumbs up and subscribe if you can, and hit me up if you have any questions or if I missed anyone.